So let's officially get started. Welcome to what I like to call lab confessions. Through LinkedIn made me use a more professional title. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in this beautiful, chaotic world of food and beverage quality control. I'm Phil, and I've spent the last 15 years of my life obsessing over something that most people find about as exciting as watching painting dry. That's laboratory information and management systems. But there is the thing, and this might sound crazy. I generally believe that limbs are sexy. Yes, I said it, sexy. My wife thinks I need therapy, but hear me out. When you see a lab transform from chaos to harmony, when you watch error rates plummet and efficiency soar, when you see that moment of pure joy on a lab manager's face when they realize that they can't actually go home before midnight, that's pure magic, folks. With 20 years in quality management, quality control, quality assurance, and R&D across the food, beverage, life, and material sciences industries, I've seen the same problems from lab teams worldwide. Manual workflows, scattered data, and constant compliance risks. At One Limbs, we help lab teams streamline processes, cut costs by up to 45%, and achieving full traceability in as little as 30 days. Today, we're going to talk about 10 most common ways that food and beverage lab teams accidentally sabotage themselves. Think of me as your friendly neighborhood lab therapist. Except instead of asking about your childhood, I'm going to ask about your sample tracking procedures. Some things psychologists weep. But don't worry, we are not here to judge. We're here to fix, to improve, and maybe to have a few laughs along the way. Because if we can't laugh at our mistakes, what's the point of making them in the first place? So let's move on with myself. Let's paint me a picture, or Picker doesn't work so far. We have some general information, webinars recording. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. And if you have some more comments, just write an email, hello@onelimbs.com. The rest is blah, blah, blah. I think we can skip that. Goals of the webinar, SIP2, agenda. We come directly into what is needed. So let's paint me out. Let me paint you a picture. It's 6 p.m. on a Friday. You're a QC manager at a beverage company, and you've got 3 production lines waiting for release. A customer complaint that needs investigating, and an auditor coming Monday morning. And your star microbiologist just called in sick. Oh, and your limbs just crashed again. Sounds familiar? I can see some of you are nodding through the screen. Don't worry, your secret is with me. This is the reality of most food and beverage quality control labs today. You've been asking to do more with less, faster than ever, while maintaining the highest standards of quality and compliance. It's like being asked to perform brain surgery while riding a unicycle. Technically possible, but probably not advisable. The numbers don't lie. Sample volumes are increasing. Sorry. Okay, the microphone is working. So, yes, I got you. Sorry. So the sample volumes are increasing by an average of 15% years per year. So regulations are getting stricter, and let's be honest, more confusing. Consumer expectations are through the roof, and somehow budgets remain, well, let's say, optimistic. But there is what I've learned after working with over 200 food and beverage lab teams across 30 countries. The lab teams that thrive aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest budget or the fanciest equipment. They're the ones that have figured out how to avoid the common pitfalls that trap 90% of their competitors. Think of today's session as your personal GPS for navigating through treacherous waters of lab management. We're going to identify the potholes, the dead ends, and the scenic routes that look pretty but lead nowhere. The most importantly, we're going to give you the roadmap to success. So buckle up, grab another coffee or tea, I don't discriminate, and let's dive into the wonderful world of lab optimization. Trust me, it's going to be more fun than it sounds. So let's start with the first pitfall. That's inadequate staff training. And to be honest, oh boy, this one hits close to me home. Inadequate staff training, or as I like to call it, the buddy system from hell. I was consulting for a brewery in Germany, beautiful facility, state-of-the-art equipment, beer that would make angels weep with joy. But the training program, well, let's just say it made me weep for different reasons. Picture this. New employees walks in on Monday morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. The lab manager says, "Hey, Klaus, meet Hans. Hans been here for 6 months. He will show you the ropes." And that's it. That's the entire training program. Hans learned from Greta, who learned from Frederick, who learned from someone who probably retired during the Weimar Republic. Long time ago. It's like a game of telephone, but instead of ending up with a funny misunderstanding, you end up with contaminated and failed audits. Not quite assuming. The problem is that Hans might be a lovely person, probably makes excellent schnitzel, but he's also developed some, let's call them creative interpretations of the standard procedures. Maybe he found a shortcut that saves 30 seconds but compromises accuracy. Maybe he's been doing something wrong for 6 months and nobody noticed. Maybe he thinks the autoclave is just a really expensive fragrant cooker. Here's the brutal truth. Every untrained or poorly trained employee is a walking compliance violation waiting to happen. They're not doing it maliciously. They're doing their best with inadequate formation. But good intentions don't prevent contamination. And they certainly don't impress auditors. I've seen labs where the error rate dropped by 60%. 60%. 6-0. Just by implementing proper training protocols. We're talking about structured programs. with competency verification, regular assessments, and revolutionary concepts, actual documentation of what people learned. This solution isn't sky rocket science, but it doesn't require commitment. But it does require commitment. Great training programs that are more comprehensive than following Hans around for a week. Document competencies. Test knowledge. And for the love of all that is holy, make sure your trainers actually know what they are doing. Because at the end of the day, your lab is only as good as people running it. And people can only be as good as the training they receive. Number 2, poor documentation and standard operating procedure management. Moving on to this pitfall, and this one is my personal favorite. And by favorite, I mean it makes me want to hide under my desk and cry. Poor documentation and SOP management. Let me read you an actual except from an SOP I encountered last year. And I'm not making this up. Add the reagent until it looks like right. That's it. That's the entire instruction. Add the reagent until it looks right. Until it looks right. I asked lab manager, what does right look like? He said, well, you know, right? I said, no, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. He said, it's hard to explain. You just, you know, it when you see it. Folks, this is not a dating app. We are not looking for chemistry based on gut feelings. We are running analytical chemistry based on scientific principles. The problem with vague documentation is that it creates what I call tribal knowledge. I got into this too about Matt Sutter, just another beautiful and very valuable webinar. Just check it out. Information that exists only in people's heads and gets passed down through oral tradition like some sort of laboratory folklore. Let them say that when the solution turns the color of a Somerset over the Alps, you know it's ready. But there is what happened when Klaus goes on vacation. Or retires, or decided to become a yoga instructor in Bali, which, let's be honest, sounds pretty appealing some days. All that knowledge walks out of the door with him, and suddenly nobody knows what's right looks like anymore. I worked with a dairy company where they had 47 different versions of the same SOP floating around. 47. Some were printed, some were digital on a share file, SharePoint, some were handwritten on napkins. Okay, that last one might be an exaggeration, but barely. Nobody knew which version was current, so everyone just did whatever remembered from the last time. The audit was, let's call it educational for everyone involved. The solution is what I called cookbook-style documentation. If you can follow a recipe to make a souffle, and trust me, souffle are temperamentally little things, you should be able to follow an standard operating procedure to run a test. Every step, every parameter, every decision point should be crystal clear. And please, for the love of all that is scientific, implement version control. I don't care if you use fancy document management system or just put dates on your files or version numbers. Just make sure everyone knows which version is the real one. For future self, well, thank you. And your auditors will actually smile. Yes, auditors can smile. I have seen it happen once. Let's continue. Where are we at? There seems a header to be broken, but this pitfall number 3 should be manual data entries and transcription. So now we come to the pitfall number 3, and this one is close to my heart because it's how I got into this business in the first place. Manual data entry and transcription. So manual data handling overall in labs, or as I like to call it, the human error Olympics. Picture young Phil, fresh out of university, working in a food testing lab in Zurich. My job was to taking reagents from instruments and manually enter them into spreadsheets. Sounds very simple, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. Let me tell you about what a day I accidentally turned a perfectly good batch of yogurt into a potential biohazard. I was transcribing pH readings, and instead of entering 4.2, I entered 2.4. Now, 4.2 is perfectly for yogurt. 2.4 is perfect for, well, maybe dissolving metal. The production team nearly had a heart attack when they saw the results. So maybe the beaker will resolve in production, directly on the production line. That's when I learned that humans and repetitive data entry go together about as well as pineapple and pizza. Controversial at best, distressing at worst. Sorry, Italian friends in the audience. So statistics are sobering. Manual data entry has an error rate of 3 to 5%. That might not sound like much, but when you're processing thousands of samples, those errors add up faster than calories during the holidays. And unlike holidays calories, these errors can shut down production lines, trigger recalls, and make regulatory agencies very, very unhappy. But there is the beautiful thing about living in the 21st century. We have technology. Instruments can talk directly to computers. Computers can validate data in systems can flag anomalies before they become problems. It's like having a really smart, never tired, never distractive assistant who doesn't need coffee breaks. I worked with a beverage company that was spending 40 hours per week just on data transcription. 40 hours. That's a full-time job dedicated to copying numbers from one place to another. After implementing automated data capture, they reduced that to about 2 hours per week. For quality checks, that's 38 hours of human intelligence freed up to do actually thinking instead of mindless copy and pasting. And the error rate? Only errors were when someone spilled coffee on the keyboard, which, let's be honest, is a risk we all will live with. The moral of the story: humans are brilliant at problem solving, pattern recognition, and creative thinking. We're really terrible of being photocopiers. So let's stop asking people to be photocopiers and start letting them to be brilliant humans as they are. Plus, your staff will actually thank you for not making them to mind numbering data entry all day. Happy stuff, accurate data, efficient processes. It's a win-win-win situation. The only losers are the errors, and frankly, they had it coming. All right. Let's come to pitfall number 4. Inefficient sample management. There's also a wrong title in it. But pitfall number 4 is something like I call the great sample hide and seek championship. And trust me, the samples are winning. I once visited a lab where they had a sample that had been missing for 3 weeks. They knew it exists because it was in their logbook, but nobody could find it. The lab manager was convinced it had achieved sentience and was hiding somewhere, plotting its revenge. We finally found it in the break room refrigerator, next to someone's leftover sandwich. Apparently, someone thought it was a new type of yogurt. The sandwich, by the way, was also 3 weeks old and had developed its own ecosystem. I'm not sure which one was concerning from a microbiologist standpoint. But jokes aside, poor sample management is like playing Jenga with your entire quality system. Every misplaced sample, every unclear label, every workflow bottleneck is another block you're pulling out of the towers. And we all know how Jenga ends, with everything crashing down. The problem usually starts with good intentions. Someone creates a system that works perfectly for about 50 samples per day. But then the business grows, sample volume increases, and suddenly you're trying to manage 500 samples per day with a system designed for 50. It's like trying to park a bus in a bicycle rack. Technically possible, but not advisable. I've seen labs where samples get lost in what I call the Bermuda Triangle of quality control. That mysterious space between sample recipient and result reporting, where samples just disappear. Sometimes they're resurface weeks later, like messages in a bottle washing up on a distant shore. Usually they're found in most logical places possible, which of course was the last place anyone looked. The solution is what I call sample GPS. Every sample needs to know where it is, where it's been, and where it's going. Barcode tracking, QR code tracking, automated workflow, intelligent prioritization. It's like having a real good air traffic control system, but for test tubes and samples instead of airplanes. One of our clients implemented a comprehensive sample management system and reduced their lost sample rate from 2.3% to essentially zero. Zero. The only samples they lost now were the ones that someone accidentally drops. And even then, the system knows exactly which sample it was and can trigger a replacement request automatically. The best part? Their lab technicians went from spending 30% of their time looking for samples to spending 30% of their time actually analyzing them. Revolutionary concept. I know. Okay, let's hop on and continue with pitfall number 5. Pitfall number 5 is what I call flying blind in the quality control cockpit. And it's about as safe as it sounds. This one hits different because it's not just about efficiency or convenience. It's about the fundamental reliability of your results. And unreadable results in food and beverage testing aren't just inconvenient, they can be dangerous. I work with a juice manufacturer who've been skipping method verification for their new testing procedures. The reasoning? We've been doing this for 20 years. We know what we are doing. Classic case of experience breeding overconfidence. Then they had a batch of apple juice tested positive for a pathogen that should have been killed during pasteurization. Panic mode. Production stops. Regulatory agencies called. Lawyers start cycling like sharks who smell blood in the water. Turns out the testing method wasn't detecting the pathogen's reliability. They've been getting false negatives for months, maybe longer. The positive results wasn't a contamination event. It was their method finally working correctly for once. Scary part? Well, never know how many contaminated batches made it to the market because their quality control procedures weren't actually controlling quality. This is what happened when you treat quality control procedures like suggestions rather than requirements. It's like having a smoke detector with dead batteries. It gives you a false sense of security right up until your house burns down. The 3 pillars of adequate quality control procedures are method verification, media performance monitoring, and daily controls. Think of them as the holy trinity of reliable results. Skip any one of them, and you are essentially playing Russian roulette with your production or product quality. Method verification ensures your testing procedures actually work. Media performance monitors ensures your growth media can actually grow what it's supposed to grow. Daily controls ensures everything is working correctly today, not just the day you set it up. The good news is that implementing proper quality control procedures isn't rocket science. It's just systematic science. Document your verification studies, set acceptance criteria for your media, run controls with every batch. It's like having a quality control safety net that catches problems before they become disasters. One of our pharmaceutical clients, and yes, I know this is focusing more about food and beverage webinar, but the principles apply. Implement comprehensive quality control protocols and caught 23 potential issues in their first month. 23 issues that would have resulted in failed batches, regulatory violations, or worse. Their comment: we had no idea how many problems we weren't seeing. Ignorance might be bliss, but in quality control, knowledge is power. And power is what keeps your products safe and your customers happy. Let's move on with pitfall number 6. So pitfall number 6 is something I experience personally every time I try to manage my digital life. Siloed systems and context switching. It's like having a toolbox where every tool is in a different room of your house. Picture this. You're a lab technician trying to complete a simple microbiology test. First, you log into the sample management system to check the sample details. Then you switch to the instrument software to run the analysis. Then you open a spreadsheet to record the result. Then you switch to the LIMS to enter the data. Then you open your email to notify the production team. Then you switch to the document management system to check the latest SOP version. By the time you're done, you've forgotten why you started, your coffee is cold, and you're questioning your life choice. Sounds familiar? Research shows that the average knowledge worker switches between applications 1,000 times per day. 1,000 times. That's once every 45 seconds during an 8-hour workday. And each switch costs you about 23 seconds to refocus, or even more. Do the math. That's over 6 hours per day lost on content switching. I worked with a diary lab where technicians were using 7 different systems to complete a single test. It was like switching someone. It was like watching someone try to conduct an orchestra where every musician is in a different building. The musicians might eventually happen, or the music might eventually happen, but it's not going to be pretty. The lab managers told me our people are spending more time navigating software than actually doing science. That's when you know you have a problem, when your tools are getting into the way of your work instead of enabling it. But there is a beautiful thing about integrated systems. They eliminate the chaos. Imagine having all your tools in one toolbox, all your information in one place, all your workflows connected seamlessly. It's like going from horse-drawn carriage to a Tesla. Same destination, completely different experience. One of our clients reduced their average test compilation time by 35% just by eliminating context switching. They didn't work faster, they work smarter. Their technicians went from being digital nomads, wandering between applications, to being focused scientists doing what they do best. The moral of the story? Your lab management system should feel like a well-organized kitchen, where everything has its place and you can find what you need without opening every cabinet. Because life's too short to spend it hunting for the digital equivalent of a can opener. Number 7. Pitfall number 7 is the difference between being a firefighter and being a fire prevention specialist. And let me tell you, prevention is a lot less stressful and significantly better for your blood pressure, more healthy. I call this whack-a-mole syndrome. You know the game? Problems pop up randomly. You frenetically try to solve them. And just when you think you've got everything under control, 3 more problems appears. It's exhausting, inefficient, and completely avoidable. I was consulting for a brewery, beautiful place, made beer that could make you weep with joy, but the quality manager's approach was pure chaos. Every day was a new crisis. Monday, contamination in tank 7. Tuesday, pH issues in the wheat beer line. Wednesday, yeast viability problems. Thursday, off flavors in the IPA. Friday, everyone goes home exhausted and prays for a quiet weekend. The quality manager looked like he hadn't slept in months. He told me, "Oh, I feel like I'm playing defense against an invisible opponent who keeps changing the rules." That's when I knew he had a classic case of reactive management. Look at this chart. It tells the whole story. The red line shows reactive quality management. Everything looks fine until suddenly it doesn't. Then you scramble to fix the problem. Things improve temporarily, but you never address the root cause. So the cycle repeats. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a leaky pipe. It might hold for a while, but eventually you're going to have a flop. The blue line shows proactive quality management. You see the trend developing before it becomes a problem. You take corrective actions while you still have time to think clearly. You prevent the crisis instead of managing it. Here's the beautiful thing about it. Proactive quality management is not magic. It's just math. Patterns, trends, statistical analysis. Your data is trying to tell you the story about what's going to happen next. Only question is, are you listening? We implemented predictive analytics for that brewery I mentioned. Within 3 months, they went from fighting fires every day to preventing them before they started. The quality managers told me for the first time in 5 years, I actually slept through the night without worrying about what crisis would be waiting for me in the morning. It was beautiful. The transformation was remarkable. Instead of spending their time fixing problems, they started spending their time optimizing processes. Instead of explaining failures to managers, they started presenting improvement opportunities. Instead of being the department that everyone blamed when things went wrong, they became the department that prevented things from going wrong in the first place. And the best part? Proactive quality management is actually easier than reactive management. It just requires a shift in mindset from how do we fix this to how do we prevent this? And trust me, prevention is always cheaper than cure in quality management and in life. Let's hop on to pitfall number 8. Because pitfall number 8 is what I called the audit nightmare. It's the kind of nightmare where you show up to an exam you forgot about in your underwear, and the questions are all in a language you don't speak. Let you tell me you about the most uncomfortable 3 hours of my professional life. I was sitting in a conference room with a client during the regulatory audit. The auditor, let's call her Inspector Doom, because that's what she felt like, asked a simple question. Can you show me the complete testing history for batch 2024-03-15? Do you hear it? Simple question, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. Lab manager started shuffling through papers. The QA director began frenetically clicking through different computer systems. The production manager started making phone calls. It was like watching a really sad version of a treasure hunt where nobody remembered where they buried the treasure. After 2 hours, they managed to piece together about 70% of their testing history. The other 30 was scattered across handwritten logbooks, archive emails, and what I can only describe as institutional memory, which is a fancy way of saying Klaus remembers doing something, but he's not sure what or when. I think you know what happened. Inspector Doom was not amused. The look on her face could have curdled milk at 50 pace. The audit finding was, let's call it, educational for everyone involved. Here is the thing about traceability, and it's not just about compliance, but that's certainly important. It's about being able to tell the story of your product from raw materials to finished goods. Every test, every decision, every change should be part of that story. And like any good story, it should have a clear beginning, middle, and end. That's it. But there's what I've learned. Good traceability isn't just about having the information. It's about being able to find it when you need it. It's the difference between having a library and having a pile of books. Both contains the same information, but only one is actually useful. We implemented a comprehensive traceability system for that client called OneLimbs. 6 months later, they had another audit. Same type of question from the auditor. Can you show me the complete testing of history batch 2024 or 922? 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That's how long it took to generate a complete comprehensive report with every test, every result, every decision, every change, all cross-referenced and timestamped in OneLimbs. The auditor actually smiled. I didn't know they could that. She said it was the most organized documentation she's been seeing for a while. The moral of the story? Good traceability is like having a really good memory. It makes everything else easier. But traceability is like having amnesia. You know something happened, but you can't remember what, when, or why. And in the world of food and beverage quality, amnesia is not a viable business strategy. Up on to number 9, inefficient reporting and communication. Pitfall number 9 is something like I call the report that time forgot, because by the time you finished creating it, the information is already obsolete. I once worked with a food manufacturer where the weekly quality report took 16 hours to prepare. 6 hours to prepare. That's 2 full working days. The poor quality manager would start on Thursday morning and finish on Friday afternoon, just in time for the weekend. By Monday, when the manager actually reads the report, half the information was already out of date. It was like getting a weather report from last week or reading newspapers from yesterday. Technically accurate for when it was written, but not particularly useful for making today's decision. But there is a really tragic part. Clicking. Won't work. Okay, let's try it like this. This quality manager was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. She had insights that could have transformed the entire operation. But instead of analyzing trends and identify opportunities, she was spending 40% of their time formatting spreadsheets and copying data between systems. It's like having Einstein work as a photocopy operator. Technically, he could do the job, but you're wasting his potential and your money. The problem with manual reporting is that it's not just slow, it's also inconsistent. Every report looks different depending on who creates it and what mood they're in. I've seen monthly reports where the same metric was calculated 3 different ways in 3 consecutive months. The numbers were all correct, but they weren't comparable. It's like measuring distance in kilometers 1 month, miles the next, and nautic miles the third. Technically accurate, completely useless. Look at this comparison. Manual reporting processes typically takes 80% of the available time, leaving only 20% for actual analysis and actions. Automated reporting flips the ratio, 20% for report generation, 80% for thinking about what the data means and what to do about it. I love automation because success stories, this client was one of my favorite. After implementing automation for automated generated reports, their quality managers went from spending 2 days a week on reports to spending 2 hours a week reviewing them. Let's read up 40 hours per week for actual quality management. That transformation was remarkable. Instead of being a data compiler, she became a data interpreter. Instead of telling management what happens last week, she started predicting what might happen next week. Instead of being reactive, she became proactive. Instead of being overwhelmed, she became empowered. And the best part? Management actually started reading the reports because they were timely relevant and actionable. Revolutionary concept, reports that people actually want to read. Let's continue and close with the final pitfall, number 10. And finally, the big one, the final boss, the ultimate challenge, resistance to digital transformation, or as I call it, the great digital denial. This one is personal for me because I've been on both sides of the conventions and the conversations. I've been the guy trying to convince people to embrace technology. And I've also been the guy who is skeptical of new systems. So I get it. I really do. Let me tell you about Hans. Not the Hans from the training story, a different Hans. This Hans was a lab manager at a dairy company in Austria. Brilliant scientist, 30 years of experience, could identify contaminations by smell alone. Seriously, it was like a superpower. When we first met, Hans looked at me like I was trying to sell him a timeshare in a swamp. He said, "Phil, I've been running this lab since before you were born. We use paper logbooks, Excel spreadsheets in our brains. It works. Why would I want to complicate things with computers?" Fair question. Really fair question. And you know what? He was right. His system didn't work. His system did work for the volume they were processing in 1995. But this was 2023. And they were processing 5 times more samples with the same number of people. His system was like trying to manage modern air traffic with a telegraph. Technical possible, but not advisable. The resistance wasn't about technology, it was about fear. Fear of change. Fear of learning new systems, fear of making mistakes, fear of becoming obsolete. These are real, valid concerns. I never met anyone who woke up thinking, you know what? You know what would make my day better? Learning a completely new way to do my job. But here is what I've learned. The best way to overcome resistance is not with pressure, but with proof. So don't tell. Demonstrate value, don't just promise it. Start small, build confidence, celebrate wins. With Hans, we started with just sample tracking. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Just a simple barcode system to replace handwritten logbooks. Within a week, he was finding samples 50% faster. Within the first months, he was wondering how he ever managed without it. 6 months later, Hans was our biggest advocate. He told me, Phil, I thought technology would make my job harder. Instead, it made my job better. I spend less time on paperwork and more time on actually science. I go home earlier, I sleep better, and I actually enjoy coming work again. That's the real goal of digital transformation. Not to replace human intelligence, but to amplify it. Not to make jobs obsolete, but to make them more fulfilling. Not to complicate processes, but to simplify them. The statistic peaks speaks for themselves. Labs that embrace digital transformation see improvements across every metric that matters. Efficiency, accuracy, compliance, employee satisfaction. But the most important metric isn't on any chart. It's the look of relief on a lab manager's face when they realize they don't have to fight their system anymore. Digital transformation isn't about technology. It's about transformation. And transformation, my friends, is always worth the effort. Let's bring this to a close. Now I know what you're thinking. Phil, these stories are entertaining, but do you have any actual proof that this stuff works? Fair question. Let me tell you about one of my favorite success stories. Last year, we worked with a global beverage manufacturer. I can't name them because of confidential agreements, but let's just say the products are probably in your refrigerator right now. They had three production facilities, quality control lab processing over 450 samples daily. And a quality management system that would help together with digital duct tape and prayers. Their challenges was like a greatest hits collection of everything we've talked about today. Manual data entry with a 4% error rate. That's 40 errors per 1,000 samples. Average turnaround time of 48 hours for test results, which meant production lines were sitting idle, waiting for release and their traceability. Let's just say their auditors were not impressed. The quality director told me, Phil, we're drowning in data, but starving for information. We've had numbers everywhere, but we can't make sense of them fast enough to make good decisions. Here's what I love about this story. The transformation didn't take years. We implemented one LIMS across all three facilities in just 10 weeks. From chaos to harmony in nearly 3 months. First part was the system configuration and the setup. So the current state assessment was instance setup and the user testing. Second part was instant configuration, data import, and featuring enabling. And the third part and the final step was reviewing, validation, approval, and the guided go live. The results Error rate dropped from 4% to 0.2%. Turnaround time went from 48 hours to 12 hours. Compliance scores improved from 82 to 98%. Sample throughput increases from 540 to 800 samples per day with the same stuff. But you know what? The best metric was employee satisfaction. The quality control director told me the first time in years my people are excited about coming to work. They're doing science instead of paperwork, solving problems instead of firefightings. 6 months later, they achieve full return on investment. Just 6 months. The system had paid for itself through efficiency gains, error reduction, and fast decision making. But more importantly, they had transformed from a reactive organization to a pro-reactive one. The CEO called me personally to say thank you. He said, Phil, you didn't just improve our lab operations, you gave us our competitive advantage back. That's when you know you've done something meaningful. All right, let's close with a summary. We've covered a lot of ground today, 10 pitfalls, countless stories, and hopefully a few laughs along the way. Let me bring it all together for you. These 10 pitfalls aren't just theoretical problems. They're real challenges the real labs face every day. Inadequate training, poor documentation, manual data entry, inefficient sample management, inadequate quality control procedures, silent systems, reactive quality management, poor traceability, inefficient reporting, and resistance to change. But there's the thing. Every single one of these pitfalls is avoidable. Every single one has a solution. And most importantly, every single one is an opportunity to transform your lab from good to great. OneLIMS addresses all of these challenges with an integrated platform that brings everything together. One system, one interface, one source of truth. It's like having a Swiss Army knife for lab managers. Everything you need in one lean, elegant, centralized, traceable package. But you know what? Don't take my word for it. I could talk for hours about features and benefits and technical specifications. But what really matters is what works for you in your lab, with your team, solving your specific challenges. So here's what I'm going to suggest. And this isn't a sales pitch. It's a genuine offer to help. If you're dealing with any of these pitfalls, if you're tired of fighting your systems instead of using them, if you want to see what transformation looks like in your specific situation, let's talk. Schedule a personalized demo, not a generic presentation, but a real conversation about your real challenges with your real solution. We'll look at your processes, understand your pain points, and show you exactly how OneLIMS can help. No pressure, no obligation, just honest advice from someone who's been where you are. Because here's what I've learned after 15 years in this business. Every lab is unique, but the problems are surprisingly similar. And the solution, they're more achievable than you might think. Your lab doesn't have to be perfect, but it can be better. Your processes don't have to be flawless, but they can be more efficient. Your team doesn't have to work harder, but they can work smarter. Before we close, I want to leave you with some easy practical steps you can take starting today. These are what I call the low-hanging fruits. Small actions that make a big difference. Write down one problem. Fix one process. Talk to your team. Track one metric. Plan one next step. As a tip, just take a screenshot. And how to start? As we wrap up today's session, here are 5 key takeaways I want you to remember. Digital first mindset. Data integrity is non-negotiable. Integration creates speed. Be proactive, not reactive. Small wins, big impact. Also worth a screenshot. With that, I want to thank you for your time and engagement today. Let's keep the conversation going, whether it's a follow-up call, a demo, or just exchanging ideas. Together, we can build labs that are not just ready for the future, but ahead of it. The question isn't where the transformation is possible. It's where you are ready to make it happen. And if you're ready, we're here to help make it as smooth, successful, and maybe even as fun as possible. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your commitment to quality. Now let's open it up, and please don't hold back. The more challenging, the more fun it is to answer. Related to the time, please send all your open questions to hello@onelimbs.com. We're happy to answer them and get back to you. And for all the other people who want to have a quick lab check, first introduction or discovery call, scan the QR code, and we will get back. With that, another thank you very much for your time and attention. Wish you a great day. Keep your nerves, stay safe, and all the best. Take care, and hopefully see you soon at one of our physical or digital events. See you soon. Bye-bye.